Today's session is called How to Win a Job and Keep It. So we can start maybe with my experience with the Fireland Symphony and how that all came about. Any of you happen to have been around in 2000 and gosh, what was it, 9? When I was a candidate. So what happens is routinely an orchestra with a conducting opening can have as many as 200 applicants. And I don't know how many the Fireland Symphony had. I don't think it was 200, but I read about it someplace. I don't even know where. There are various places where you can find out about openings. One, probably I saw it at the Conductors Guild, which is now the International Conductors Guild, of which I've been a member for many years. And they list job opportunities, it's called. And I saw an opening for the Fireland Symphony. And I said, well, all I know about Sandusky is a bunch of roller coasters in the middle of Lake Erie. That's all I knew. But I was already at the Institute of Music and the Cleveland Pops. And I had applied for various openings. Erie and Youngstown had openings, and I applied for those. And even though I wasn't selected for either, I was able to appear as a guest conductor several times with both orchestras. So in a way, I was a runner-up, a happy runner-up, since I got a lot of concerts to do. And I thought I was a very serious contender for Youngstown. As it turned out, they offered it to somebody else. And I'm really happy the way things turned out. So I believe the general routine, it can be one or two ways. Either I said 3 to 6 people are asked to do a concert series. I think in the case of Firelands, it was 4. And one poor candidate, I think, got snowed out or something. If Jody were here, she would give you that information. She's probably the walking encyclopedia of the Fireland Symphony. But mine, fortunately, was not. And I really didn't know anything about the orchestra. But thanks to Jamie Steineman, who was the new executive director, and Ann Voigt, who was then the board president, they were really, really, I saw real leadership there. I saw real possibilities that something can really develop out of this. And so one of the things you do then, I was one of the 4 candidates. I gave a program for the orchestra to do. And there were also interviews involved in the process. And the program that I selected, I remember very well, was Finlandia by Sibelius, which is not too difficult to play, but very effective and a fine piece. Mozart Violin Concerto No. 4 with Celeste Golden. Celeste was a student at the Institute of Music. She was, I don't know if she had won that, but she, at that point or near future, was 3rd place winner in the Indianapolis international competition, which is a very big deal. And now I believe she's one of the concertmasters of the St. Louis Symphony. So getting her to play, and she was a student at Cleveland Institute of Music, I asked her to play. And then I did the Enigma Variations by Elgar. This is a piece which depicts 14, well, including himself, of Elgar's close friends. And then the last piece on the program was an encore, not announced, and I played It Ain't Necessarily So on the clarinet. So the rehearsals went okay, and the orchestra had some instruments where they really needed some help. And Jamie and Ann, or Jamie, made sure that we had enough players. We had, I think, 12 CIM students came courtesy of Tom's Cruise, which is the local limousine service. And she made arrangements for all 12 of them to be carted up to Sandusky. And that was that in itself told me that Jamie is serious about this. Well. And also, one of the things of the Enigma variations, which I like to do, is slide projection, a slide presentation, PowerPoint, and as a photo of each of Elgar's friends and a little description of each of their, about their lives, about their personalities. And I think it adds a lot to the performance. Well, they couldn't find a projector. And I said, you know, if we have to do without it, we have to do without it. But if we can get it, it would be really great. Well, Jamie found one. And, you know, all of a sudden, these people were very serious about doing something with this orchestra. And so when I was asked to take the position, I readily agreed. And I've seen the orchestra grow tremendously over the years. We've had some really terrific, memorable concerts. And obviously, we can't wait to get back on stage. And in the new theater, when that opens, it's going to be probably something very, very special. But in the meantime, we plan on playing in the summer, and somehow we'll get our way through it. We've got incredible support and most appreciative of everybody's hard work in keeping it going. So we're a little off topic, but that was the story essentially of the Fireland Symphony. So I guess the name of my talk is, how do you win a job? But then once you've won the job, how do you keep it? And basically, there's just a few things that you have to remember. Be very prepared anytime you step on the podium. Do programs which have appeal to your audience. Be respectful of people, and don't be an idiot. You know, use common sense and treat people with respect, and know what you're doing, and create a nice atmosphere. One thing, I'm very fortunate with all the orchestras I conduct, there is never a toxic atmosphere. Because if there is, I'd rather do something else, quite frankly. I want to work with people who want to be there, they want to play, they are motivated to do a good concert. It's my job to get them to the point where they're going to do a good concert. So once you're in the job, I mean, there are a whole outline of things also, and I can tell you a little bit about them. So before you're even, let's say you get to that point where out of the 200 applicants, you're one of the 6 people who have been selected to do this. I mean, that first step, even there are things that I've applied for. I said, well, gee, I would hope to be considered, and I never was. And then others, like Firelands, I never heard of, they said, sure, we'd be happy to check you out. So you just absolutely never know. Along the way, I auditioned for Fort Wayne Philharmonic, Shreveport Symphony, Cedar Rapids Symphony. There's probably another one in there. Anyway, I didn't get any of those for whatever reason.
Hey, Carl.
And question, yes.
Well, I just wanted to just say that Ashland Symphony Orchestra is going through a search right now for a new conductor. And it was actually supposed to happen this current season. They had selected, they did have over 200 applicants, just like you said. And wow. They narrowed it down. They did several Zoom session interview things, but then they did narrow it down to 5, and they were supposed to conduct, they were assigned a specific concert that they were supposed to conduct. But, you know, all of that, because of COVID and everything, all that changed. So they're starting all over again for 21, wow. 22.
With the same 5 people, though?
Same 5 people. They're all still in a year later.
Right, exactly. So when you're one of those people, and even just to get to that point, if you have a resume which speaks volumes, that's great. If you know somebody from the orchestra, if somebody can put a good word for you, if maybe somebody knows the executive director, knows people in the search committee, unless you have a resume which just says take me, you might have to get some sort of way to get into the field, and that can take some doing. But again, some of it is a crapshoot, and some of it is okay. You got the stuff. Now, once you're selected, again, you need to be super, super prepared, which means make sure that all materials you send are easily accessed by email. Your photos are good. You have you've learned about the orchestra. You are ready for the interview portion and the musical. So you have sort of two segments. Let's say there's the on the podium segment and the off the podium segment. The on the podium segment is be prepared, make sure the parts are well marked, make sure, most important really, is make sure that you've picked repertoire that the orchestra can play and feel good about. There are even the Enigma variations, which I selected, was a little bit of a stretch. There were a few sections which were quite difficult, but we found our way, and we were able to pull it off. But a lot of conductors are, they want to conduct certain pieces. You know, they want to do whatever, Beethoven's Third Symphony. Well, not every orchestra can play Beethoven's Third Symphony. And in general, you're better off being conservative with your programming, because, like I said, if musicians, especially if it's a community orchestra, they're volunteers, or even a regional orchestra like Ashland or Firewinds, it's still, if you don't know that much about the orchestra, then it's best to be a little bit conservative in your programming. Also, if you're coming from out of town, always plan to be there a day before the first rehearsal. Now, I say that because when I conducted in Boise, Idaho in April, there was something the night before I wanted to go see before the first rehearsal. So, okay, so I took an early flight the day of the first rehearsal. This is April, mind you. We're flying into Denver, and there's a snowstorm. And they tell us we're going to be diverted to Colorado Springs. Great. And then they said, okay, we can get to Denver. And I had with me my dear friend George Judy. It was a swing program, and George was to play the drum set. And so we get to the airport in Denver. Everything is delayed, backed up. So there's a flight to Boise with one seat remaining. And so out of the two of us, I was selected to go. And I got into Boise. The rehearsal started at 7:30. I got to the hall at 7:28. And so I learned a lesson. And it's smart to put in the contracts too. Most orchestras will insist, I know in Wichita, where I've conducted a couple of times, you have to come in the night before. I mean, Wichita can have 100 degrees, but in the dead of winter can have a blizzard. So you just don't know. Fortunately, we had two rehearsals, and doing a swing program without a drum set is not exactly ideal. But then the next day, we had another rehearsal. George was there, and everything went very well. So right then and there, I learned my lesson. So once you get to rehearsal again, the music has to be playable. The rehearsal schedule has to be sensible. The whole rehearsal, we could talk about that probably in one of the other sessions about rehearsing, but being an organized rehearser, being sympathetic to your players, knowing the instruments of the orchestra, it's a huge litany of things that you have to know before you even should set foot on a podium. And even I've been at it for all this time. Occasionally I'm stumped, or something happens that, yike, I didn't know that. Or I find a foreign language word that I forgot to look up, or something. It's just a slew of stuff that you have to know before you ever set foot on the podium. So, so this is the general preparation. Your rehearsals have to be paced in such a way, everything is thoroughly rehearsed. Everyone feels good about the concert when they walk in for that concert day, that they're well prepared, they know what to do. Now, when you are in the process of doing the rehearsals, you're also going to be interviewed. You also will have exposure to the media, possible radio, TV interviews, and of course, the committee is going to be grilling you. So one thing which I think is really helpful is to, as much as possible, anticipate what they're going to say. Why do you want this job? How are you qualified? What special things do you bring to the table? Tell me about one experience that didn't go well and how you fixed it. What makes you a strong candidate, what are your strengths, et cetera, et cetera. And everybody on that committee has his or their own agenda, all right? And most of the people on the committee are not musicians. So you might have the executive director, of course, board president, one or two other board members, and maybe one of the musicians. And that's your search committee. So already you may know, you may have the best interpretation imaginable for Beethoven's Fifth Symphony. And you may be a terrific conductor. But if you can't convince the board and the committee that you're the right person for the job, you're going to represent the orchestra in the most favorable light, you're not going to be looked at. There's so much that goes beyond this. And of course, like I said, the kind of questions you're going to be asked, be ready for them. And then once in a while, some people come along and maybe stump you. Just take a second, relax, and think it through for a bit. Also, you have to be very, very politic. I think one of my colleagues many, many years ago, I think he wasn't winning any jobs because he was too honest with them. They said, well, you know, sure, but you'll have to replace the concertmaster. And you know, the bass section is really awful, and that first oboe player is going to have to go. Well, okay, you have to be very, very gingerly in your approach, because I don't think anyone wants, first of all, no one wants to be told the orchestra is awful, for starters, even if there are big problems. But you have to be, you need to find out along the way, well, what's the process for auditioning? What is the tenure situation? And then rather than, you can't walk in and it's like walking into a job interview and saying, when are my vacation days? You know, you don't walk into the interview and say, I want to get rid of the concertmaster because he's awful or she's awful. So you have a list of things you may want to implement, but it has to be done very, very gradually. And you just can't go in there and just say, well, I think I'm going to upset the apple cart. And then once you're in the job and you want to do some of these things, prioritize them, figure out which are going to be short range goals and which may be a little longer range goals. You may decide that there are certain contemporary music pieces that you love to play, but maybe you need to establish yourself before you do those. And then once you do, maybe you commission composer, or have somebody come there, a live composer who can then address the audience, etc. So there's so many facets that go into this. And one thing that I've been a huge fan of for years, almost as long as I've been a professional conductor, and that is talking to the audience at the concert. When I go to an art museum and I'm looking at a painting, you know, it's I'm sure it's nice, that's interesting, and this is beautiful and colors are nice. But as soon as I get that earphone, it says, you see this character here, you see the colors that the artist used, you see this person and this scene from the Bible and this whatever, and it explains it to you, and all of a sudden you're on the inside looking out. You know, you're part of the team. You understand what's going on. So I have the same sort of thing. My philosophy is if you can find a way where you're not talking down to the audience with some sort of highfalutin technical stuff that nobody knows or cares about, or you talk to them in a way which is maybe pandering or something. So there's that happy medium, and you really have to prepare. You sort of don't go in and wing it. And what I've done, like with the Enigma variations, with the PowerPoint projections, I'll often use examples from the orchestra. When I do Romeo and Juliet by Tchaikovsky, we show Friar Lawrence theme at the beginning. Then we use the Strife theme, which is the Montagues and the Capulets, the Romeo theme, the Juliet theme. And then when people listen to it, they have a basis, a foundation of what to listen for. And this is really cool for me because I like for that space between the orchestra and the audience should not be a moat with alligators in it. It should be a user-friendly situation where someone says, oh yes, oh yeah, that's the place he explained. I thought that I really get it now. I think it's really, really cool. And even when I've done the Rite of Spring, which I've done many times, it's a sort of piece, if you have a little bit of a basis of what's going on, plus the scenes of the ballet, we project them, and it just engaging the audience and active listening is such an important part of what I think the orchestra needs to be able to do. I mean, people are so visual now, and in some cases their attention spans are not huge. So if there's anything you can do to draw them into the performance, I mean, maybe some of them come because their wives drag them, or maybe the ladies want to be with people they know, they have a nice, you know, outfit that they want to wear, which is nice, or they have a lot of friends they sit with for every concert. Those social reasons are phenomenal, and it's great. But if you could bring them into the music on top of that, that's an even better, a better bonus. So to me, that's the most rewarding thing. If someone says, you know, I listened to that piece all my life, I didn't know what was going on. And on top of that, a lot of the musicians don't know what's going on. They play, they know their parts. But when they say, oh, wow, here's the Strife theme from Mommy, and maybe they'll put a little extra energy in it because they know what it represents. So that's to me, that any way you can communicate. I like to say with what does the conductor and the center for the football team have in common? Their backsides are both to the audience, you know? How many professions do you know where your back is to the audience? So talking to the audience establishes somewhat of a personal connection. When I conducted in Denver, they had the theater was in the round. And I remember once conducting, and someone was sitting right in front of me with binoculars. I thought that was really sort of weird. Anyway, but these are just some of the very basic things. And since everyone is muted and I can't tell if there's any reaction coming from the audience, I wish you have some questions. I would be very, very, I see Ron is there. Ron's a musician, but we don't see his face today, but it shows he's there. You can ask a question. Oh, there he is. Great. He's on mute though. But any questions, any ideas? And maybe I can spur his imagination.
Well, Carl, I want to say,
yes.
I just want to say, I have not had the pleasure of actually seeing you in person conduct yet, but I've watched a lot of your videos. And I mean, you're right. That is just a key at getting that audience engaged. And we actually, the orchestra, before I came on, they hired a branding consultant. And the big thing he came up with out of his consultation was that our audiences need to know they're going to have fun and they're going to be entertained.
Exactly.
That's exactly what I've seen you do. So I want to see it in person though, daggone it.
Well, as soon as I can, but I think the real key is, if any rehearsals you want to come to, those are just so crucial to set the tone of inspiring the musicians to play well and to learn their music really well, and be part of and be recognized as being really the focal point. You know, I don't make any noise when I'm up there unless I'm playing the clarinet, but the baton doesn't make any noise. There's a saying in Italian, la bacchetta non sbaglia, which means the baton never makes a mistake. So it's one of those great expressions. So one thing I was going to mention too, if I hadn't before, is how important it is for the conductor to know about the instruments of the orchestra. And so many of my students, I mean, they're so clueless. It's just so frustrating where they don't understand the lowest, highest notes, which notes are hard to play soft, which notes don't project well, which ones project well. How do you find a harmonic on a violin, which we touch the string very lightly? And the details of the instruments are really, I think, are such a crucial point of what you do. It's just amazing. So I've been at it for half an hour. So please, questions, observations.
Actually, Carl, I have a question.
Okay, great.
So when you're up there on the podium and you are right there with the musicians, a lot of times in the theaters, what you hear on stage is not exactly what is heard in the audience, especially way back in the balcony and, you know, farther areas. Sure. Or a theater in the round or anything like that. How do you, as the conductor, make adjustments for that for each different theater?
That's a good question. The Sandusky Theater, which I love, is near and dear to my heart, has very limited reverberation. Mm-hmm. You know, ideally, I think it was at 1.8 seconds or something. Reverb time is really good. And Sandusky State Theater is very low. And so just for starters, we know that we have to play at a certain dynamic in certain senses. The strings, if they're going to get across to the audience, they have to play often louder than is marked in their part. If you do a concert in the church, which is a big reverberation, you might have to play softer and your articulations may be shorter and crisper. So, and then there are times when I've done it at the Sandusky State Theater. You just get off the podium and you walk into the hall and you listen to the orchestra, mm-hmm. which I think is really helpful. And of course, the musicians want to prove to you that they can do just as well, if not better, without you. So they'll always go 100% to make sure that to show how unnecessary you are. But often the best seats in the house are the balcony. Mm. So I don't think I've been in the hall in the balcony, but I know so many. When I went to concerts in Carnegie Hall, I always sat in the balcony. They're also cheaper too, but they're really good seats. And Severance Hall, I always like to sit in the balcony whenever I go there. So, but you're right, the podium is not always the best place to hear, number one. And number two, there are different vantage points in the hall that are going to give you different results. So that's a very, very good question. I remember when I conducted in Germany, it's now 5 years ago. And we rehearsed in this little tiny rehearsal space. And then all of a sudden we were in the hall for the dress rehearsal. And people were really far away from me. And the European orchestras often tend to play behind the beat. So you give a downbeat and then the sound comes after. So that's enough to really drive you nuts. So you get the one dress rehearsal in the hall. Where they were, it was the sort of hall where they had a lot going on. They had plays, they had operas, they had concerts. So I guess it was in use so much, opera sets and such, so we only got in the hall the one time. But the European audiences were great, by the way, but that's yet another story. But thank you for asking.
Carl?
Yes.
Will they be able to improve the acoustics when they rebuild the theater?
Yes, I know that's going to be one of the goals.
Okay.
I'm not sure how they're going to do it, but I know that the stage is going to be bigger and much deeper than it is now. I'm told they can't make it much wider, unfortunately, but I know that the acoustical properties are going to be looked at. And when that day comes along, I hope we will be consulted and to see what might be possible. They did a study on it before, but I know they didn't take any action. I think it was the surfaces had to be changed quite drastically and would have cost probably a lot of money. But now I think the opportunity is there to do something. So we're going to hope for that as well.
And a bigger orchestra pit.
Oh, well, there really isn't an orchestra pit now. There's just sort of a space where there are no chairs. But an orchestra pit would be really nice. If you do Nutcracker in a pit, that'd be sort of cool. Or I would even love to do an opera, a Verdi opera or something like that. La Traviata or something would be just terrific. So we're all holding our breath to the day. But meantime, we'll play outside and maybe in the winter there are other venues that might become available as the health concerns become less, and we're just waiting for that day.
Oopsie. So for those of you who are here tonight, just to give you a sneak peek, we are going to do a concert on June 5th at Norwalk Reservoir. It's actually the October concert we were supposed to have is being rescheduled for June 5th. And then we are doing 2 concerts at the Jackson Street Pier on July 4th, which will be a patriotic concert, of course. And then we're going to do a Christmas in July on July 25th. So that'll be like a holiday pops concert. And then we actually are working on another concert in Vermilion, but we haven't, that'll probably be in September, but we haven't established that date or those performers yet. So we're excited.
Yeah. Our musicians are excited to play also, for sure. Yeah, the performing arts during this time, which is, I mean, I think the Broadway has been closed for a year now, and it's just tragic. So anyway, but we want to be optimistic because when it comes back, we want to be ready and play with even more passion and force than before. Any other questions, observations? Did I miss something?
Actually, Carl, since I brought up outdoor concerts,
Yes.
how does that compare with playing indoor?
Well, it doesn't compare right away. We did our 200th, was it Sandusky 200th anniversary concert? When was that, Mindy? 18, 17? Do you remember offhand?
18.
18.
Yeah, it was the summer of 2018.
So I was playing this wonderful, I love playing this Italian medley on the clarinet with the orchestra. And as I'm playing, there are bugs flying into my face. So that was a real joy. But I mean, outside is nice too. But when the elements are in your favor, it's a lot nicer. When the wind is blowing music off the stand and blowing into the microphones, it's not nearly as pleasant. But to be outside and play is fine if you have a good amplification system, which we have always had. I think that's always a big plus. It's a very casual atmosphere, and people can eat and drink and make merry. And so there's definitely a lot of positives to it. But it's different for the performer. It's definitely sort of a different atmosphere. But as I say, when the conditions are fine, it just makes everyone's job a lot easier. But and then you get to play a lot of patriotic music. You get to play light classics and movie music, Hollywood, and It's always a good time. I remember when we played at Norwalk with I don't know, was it by maybe the concert before that, and it absolutely poured at 4 o'clock. I mean, it was a deluge. And we wound up starting late. They had to sweep the stage. I think there was so much water on it. But the band played on and stopped raining when it was supposed to. And we did another one. We wound up going indoors to the State Theater because it had rained. I think the whole field was a quagmire and it was 100 degrees or something. It was not a great situation to be playing outdoors. So we moved indoors. But it can be a real challenge. But then again, when conditions are good and it's very informal and people always have a good time. So that's a big plus. And we're always ready to play.
Carl?
Yes.
I assume that you've got some objections by some of the instruments, so too, if they have to be outside in the weather and humidity, and how do I
Right.
keep this thing tuned if I'm temperature's changing on me and all those kind of things?
Well, the biggest problem is the string instruments. They cannot have direct sunlight. And when they have direct sunlight, you have a lot of people complaining. In Colorado, we did a 10 a.m. concert on July 4th every year. And it got to the point where I said, I'm not going to fight this anymore. We put all the winds and brass in the front and all the strings in the back because the strings were all covered, but the winds were exposed to the sun, brass instruments and such. And then we didn't have a problem anymore. I just wasn't gonna, you just can't put these instruments in jeopardy. Like, I told, even for July 4th, we play at 6, 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock, whenever, obviously the sun is down, but you can't rehearse in the middle of a field at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. As long as there's someplace indoors or another site that you can go to, then at least we can keep people. And again, it's a question of respecting people and respecting their needs and desires. The last thing you want to have is people complaining because their instruments were damaged or something. And I know one drop of rain, and I've been with orchestras, one drop of rain, and they're running, they're gone. They run to the hills. So, water and wood don't mix. It's worse than oil and water and wood. So, and then some people have second instruments too that they use for outdoor concerts. So it all depends. It's a very good question, I'm afraid. And I'm giving you a very honest answer. Well, when conditions are good, it's really a lot of fun. Plus, you're reaching people who maybe haven't heard the orchestra. Maybe they say, wow, this is really great. We're going to come indoors now and hear you during the season. That's another ulterior goal of outdoor concerts. Anything else? Oh, well, we're coming up on 45 minutes and I'm sort of talked out, but any questions, I'm happy to hear them.
Actually, I'm curious. I don't think you had a chance last week to talk any about your establishing the Cleveland Pops. How long had you how long had the Cleveland Pops existed before you came to Firelands?
Our first subscriptions concert was October 12th, 1996. So, and a funny story, I hate to say this, but the Indians were in the playoffs. If the Indians had advanced in the playoffs, their first home game, I think it was the first home game, was October 12th, 1996. When they got knocked out, we didn't have any competition from the Indians for our first concert ever. So I didn't wish them any harm. I'm a big fan, but that was definitely a two-sided coin for me when they lost. But anyway, but otherwise, that was just a very funny circumstance that you somehow sticks in your brain 24 years later. Well, if we're good to go, Go ahead.
Yeah, one more for you, Carl.
Yes.
I'm not going to let you off the hook this early. What about discipline? That's part of the conductor too, is to make sure that everyone's treated fairly, but you also have to treat fairly means sometimes you have to have some tough luck, or be tough on people, tough love. How much of that do you experience, and how do you handle those things?
Well, first of all, you program stuff that people can play. So you don't, hopefully not in a position where you're asking someone to do something that they can't do. So, and you just be as demanding as you can, but sometimes when you get to the point where it's not going to get any better, you just leave it, and you just put yourself in that position as little as possible. And you have to know how to work on it. I remember I conducted in Toledo once, and we were doing this passage for a Christmas concert from a Mall Night Visitors. It's a shepherd's dance. There's a bunch of notes, and we worked and we worked. And after rehearsal or a break, personnel manager came up to me and says, they'll get it. Don't worry. They'll have it by the concert. So part of the job really is understanding what really needs work and what's going to what can get worked out by itself, or the musicians will take the initiative to make something work. But again, no matter what situation it is, the only thing I don't tolerate is disrespect. When people are disrespectful toward me, I have no tolerance for that. Otherwise, I have a really, really long fuse. It's going to take a lot to get me upset. But I can tell you, when someone's disrespectful, that does not sit well for me. I've had a couple of students over the years, and very, very rare, and where something happened, and I pulled them aside and I said, you don't talk to me. I don't talk to you like that. You don't talk to me like that. I think that a teacher or a conductor, I feel, has to treat the musicians or the students as their clients, and not as some sort of underlings or some sort of slaves. They're your clients. And if somebody walks into your store, you're not going to be rude to them if you're trying to sell them something. You're not going to be disrespectful to them. So that's sort of where I'm coming from. And I just can't see, to me, if it gets confrontational, that becomes a toxic situation, and I don't want any part of that. So I've been fortunate. I've been able to pretty much avoid it. I guess that's why I've been able to keep some of these jobs for 40 years. Because you just, you learn to treat people with respect. I mean, National Repertory Orchestra, 4 years as assistant and 42 years as music director. I mean, that's a tenure. 39 years at the Cleveland Institute of Music, 25 years with the Pops, and 12 years with the Firewind Symphony. If nothing else, I think I can teach my students how to hold a job. So that's sort of where I'm coming from.